Hi friends, David here from Above AVL and Learn Stage Audio. And in this video, we're going to talk about something that you need to know whether you're just starting to learn audio or whether you are teaching someone how to run audio. Let's dive in. So the premise is simple. If this hasn't happened to you before, it's gonna happen to you sometime. And that is, you're either gonna need to teach somebody how to do audio, or you're going to need to learn how to do audio. In either case, how in the world do you do it? Because if you think about it, you get into things here, right? And I've got an audio console right in front of me. It's like, man, there's a lot going on in here, right? Even an individual channel, like even before we get to that channel, right? It's like we've got microphones and stands and how to hook them up, and we've got, we get into the console and we're like, oh my goodness, first we start with the gain or the head amp, and then we're going and we're like, okay, we've got EQ, we've got high pass filters. Let's not even think about dynamics like compression and gates, and before you know it, you can really quickly overwhelm someone, and or given so much information that when they try to go use it, they are really unsuccessful, right? And so what I want to do is talk about the framework that I use to teach people when I'm teaching them how to use audio. And both in this video and the next video, we're going to talk about like some really big tips that I have on how to really set up people learning audio from you for success. Because at the end of the day, what matters, and I think this is important, is when we're teaching someone to mix audio or we're mixing audio ourselves, right? What matters, right? What is the end goal, the most important thing? It's that there's a good mix, right? It's that things are heard clearly at an appropriate level. It's that things like noise in the system or feedback are not there, or at least not prevalent. And, that's what constitutes a good mix, right? Things blend well together, etc. So how do we get there? How do you get somebody there? And this is something, I see this all the time, right? Because we work with a lot of churches at Above AVL, but we also work with music venues and all sorts of places. And the kicker is that when somebody is really good at mixing audio, or they've been doing it a long time, a lot of times you might not think or break down how to teach somebody that same skill, right? It's been so long since you hit the basics that you're just like, oh my goodness. All right, so let me walk through the process that I use and that I think is one of the better processes out there. I didn't invent it, no, I don't know who invented it. It's pretty widely used out there, but it's a good one. And it's basically a 5-step process to getting somebody started. And we're gonna step into some of the nuance of those steps here, okay? Step 1, you watch, right? Step 2, you watch and start asking some questions and start doing a little bit, okay? Step 3, you're watching, you're doing more. Step 4, you're doing, I'm watching. Step 5, right, is you're doing, I'm only there for when you need extra help. And I may have butchered it a little, but it's essentially just a gradient, just a continuum, right? Of, hey, you know what? When you first start, the most important thing to do is just watch and learn. Don't even ask questions. Just observe. And so the way that I like to do this, practical boots on the ground, is if I'm training someone new, like as a church volunteer, or I work for an AV company and I'm getting somebody new, it's like, hey, you know what? Like, come on in, okay? And say it's a church context. I usually tell them to come in at about the start of rehearsal time. So I've already set up the stage. I'm not worrying about setting microphones, where the stuff's stored, type of microphones to use. Like all of that stuff we're not worrying about. It's just, hey, you know what? We want to get you started with mixing. We want to get you learning. So we're just going to pull you in and say, hey, everything's set up. We're ready to go. Come and watch. And usually what that begins to do is really help you see, okay, there's a couple things you're going to see from it. Number 1, the ability or the skills that they already have that are going to relate to audio based on the questions they ask. Okay, having recruited and trained a lot of volunteers over the years, I can tell you that even before you get to this first step, and there's like a little bonus, probably the number 1 thing in training someone is getting the right person to begin with, right? someone who's teachable, someone who wants to learn, and hopefully someone that has some musical sensibility. So if you're even in a smaller context, tiny church or whatever, and somebody comes up and says, hey, the such and such sounded good today, or, I thought I heard the keyboards were off a little, or any sort of qualitative answer, like a question like that somebody comes, or you're talking to someone and they point something specific about the audio, then those are a great person to teach how to mix, because they're already picking up on the things you need to pick up, right? And so then you're not having to teach as much of the musical, you're having to teach more of the technical. So after somebody's been watching you for a little while, and maybe, it all depends. The pace that you go through these really depends on the trainee, how quickly they pick up and how much background knowledge, specifically musically, that they have. And this is coming from a guy who's really not a musician, who's had to learn all that stuff, is to have them start doing. Okay, so what does that look like, right? If you're in a rehearsal in a church setting, it's like, hey, you get everything started, right? You, the trainer, right? You get gain set, you get approximate EQs, you get some basic stuff rolling, and then you go, hey, here's the keys to the car, go drive for a little while. Do that in a setting that is gonna be non-destructive, right? So do it in a rehearsal. Do it in virtual sound check. Virtual sound check's such a good tool, and just tell them, hey, you know what? Don't worry about all this stuff, right? Except the labels. Just worry about going ahead, pushing faders, okay? If you run into something, you can tell them this, where you say, you know what? I need to make an adjustment on this thing in this way. Go and do that, okay? Go and help them do that, okay? And show them what you're doing, right? Because then the following stages of that are just you progressively handing more and more over to them and teaching them the things to do. Okay, now, and I do have to say, a great training resource for just teaching people the basics of things like EQ and compression, like teaching them, physically, just showing them, hey, you see this about the sound, here's how we adjust that. You hear this, here's how we adjust this. There is a book called The Live Mixing Field Guide by James Attaway. We'll link to it below. No affiliation with the guy whatsoever. He's just another audio teacher online, right? And it is a fantastic way that as you start teaching someone, either a volunteer or someone learning audio, when you want to be able to give them a little more rope, to be a little more distant, not be right with them, this is a really great guide to have in hand to go, hey, if you hear something isn't right, turn to the page for that type of source, that instrument, okay, or that vocal, and read what it says. And a lot of times the volunteers are able to figure it out from that perspective, okay? So when it comes to wrapping up kind of your training curriculum with someone, it really is as simple as just continuing to go down that continuum, continuing to go ahead and say, hey, you know what? We're going to go ahead and just keep giving you more and more rope, more and more say. So now you're mixing rehearsals. Okay, now you're with me during the service and I'm letting you mix things and I'm just giving you some feedback. I'm helping you out with transitions, et cetera. And this approach really, getting up all the way to, they're doing it and you get out of there is one of the coolest things because it really frees you up to go and, not be stuck doing, not going ahead and doing, the same thing that you're kind of stuck in. In a lot of church settings, sometimes you don't have a lot of volunteers and you're just stuck. And when you do train someone and set them free, it's so awesome because it's an incredibly freeing way to be able to, multiply what you're doing and help other people, whether in church context or other, do the audio and do a great job. The biggest thing I would say is, as you go through the steps, and kind of graduate someone through each level, don't worry so much about all of the technical fundamentals, right? We'll talk about this more in the next video, but basically, especially if you're in like a church setting, the more things you can do to set them up for success and have them not have to do on a weekly basis, that means the absolute critical things, the absolute critical mixing things that it's important for them to learn, they're going to be able to focus more on, okay? And so things like patching, all of your instruments into your stage, choosing the right microphones and having those chosen, having them maybe even positioned. If you can do those for this person and they don't have to worry about that, then the mixing skills, they're going to be able to learn much quicker. But this approach has been tested. It's been used by lots of people. It's really good. And I hope you learned something today. If you've been, kind of on the fence about teaching someone how to do audio and you want to get them going, hey, we've got an awesome course inside of the Above AVL Academy called the Basics of Live Sound. It's going to either teach you or just give you the skills to kind of word things so you can teach someone else the basics of live audio. Get them mixing, get them creating some great audio. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you learned something new from this approximately 5-step approach, which is really just a big gradient, right, of getting someone from being fully dependent to independent in mixing audio. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you guys soon. Bye.